All right. I'll start today's webinar. Everyone is hearing me well. If you can give me like thumbs up, that'll be great. Okay, great. Hello everyone. Welcome to the AAAL Graduate Student Council third webinar, Do's and Don'ts in Job Searching for Faculty Positions. Thank you for joining us from all different regions of the world. We are excited to have you all here, as well as our wonderful speakers that I will introduce to our audience shortly. I'm Ms. Zhang, a PhD candidate at the University of Minnesota and a member of the AAAL GSE Event Planning Subcommittee. I'd like to thank our GSE members first, who have been dedicated to organizing this webinar session that are informative and beneficial to graduate students in the field of applied linguistics. Before we begin, the GSE member Kyungjin Hwang will have a short announcement regarding the GSE events taking place in the upcoming AAAL conference.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. So I'm Kyungjin Hwang from AAAL GSE Event Planning Team and Steering Committee. So the Graduate Student Council is excited to announce the two panel events during the 2024 conference. So detailed information will be shared soon through our social media accounts. So please follow us for updates on these graduate student events. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Kyungjin. And now let's dive into our third webinar here. We have three wonderful speakers who will share their valuable insights and experiences in the academic job searching process. The first speaker we have is Dr. Sarraf. Dr. Sarraf is an assistant professor of technical and professional communication at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California, where she directs the Technical and Professional Communication Program. Prior to her appointment at Cal Poly, she earned a PhD in composition in applied linguistics from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and served as a writing across the curriculum and writing center specialist at West Virginia University. Her research draws on the interdisciplinary field of creativity studies to explore how technical and professional communicators use creative thinking to address wicked points. And our second speaker, Dr. Zhang, is currently on faculty at Hunter College, the City University of New York. Their scholarship deals with the complexity of multicultural and multilingual education in connection with various issues, such as those around race, class, nationality, and sociopolitical struggles. Their research interests include, but are not limited to, mediated discourse studies, teacher education, embodiment, critical posthumanism, critical literacy, and functional linguistics. Dr. Zhang holds a PhD in language and literacy education from the University of Georgia and an MA in TESOL and sociolinguistics from City University of Hong Kong. Our last but not least, our third speaker, Dr. Sa, is an assistant professor of English language education at the Education University of Hong Kong. He completed his PhD study in language and literacy education from the University of British Columbia, Canada. During his time there, he was honored to be recognized as a Killiam Laureate and also worked as a sessional lecturer. Before joining the Education University of Hong Kong, he worked as a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Calgary's Workloon School of Education. He currently holds an honorary Norham Fellow position at the Department of Education, University of Oxford. He's also a founding editor-in-chief of the Journal of Education, Language, and Ideology. His research projects examine various critical applied linguistic issues, for example, English as a medium of instruction policy and practices, and its impacts on social, emotional, and educational lived experiences of diverse students in multilingual schools, affordances of multilingual and multimodal literacies for ESL students, and the effects of teacher language ideologies and agency on educational and socio-emotional experiences of culturally and linguistically diverse students. The central goal of his research is to conceptualize anti-oppressive and asset-based alternatives for pedagogies, research, and policies. Thank you so much for joining us today again. And I was so impressed by all of your willingness to share your expertise and skills with our graduate fellows. So I will now directly jump into, before we jump into it, let me just give a brief overview of how this event is organized. So in our webinar today, our presenters will share do's and don'ts in 3 stages of job searching that are pre, and during, and finalizing of application stages. Each speaker will take a lead in one of the 3 stages and present the best strategies for successful academic faculty position searching for about 15 minutes. After each speaker's presentation, I'll also ask the other 2 speakers if they have anything additional to contribute for the discussion, about 5 minutes. And after the whole speaker's presentation, we will have a Q&A session with our audience for about 20 minutes. During the session, you're welcome to leave any questions in our chat, and we will try our best to address the questions you may have. And lastly, for successful management of our online event, I would like to ask our audience to turn off their videos and mute your mic during the session. Okay, now I will open the floor to our first speaker, Dr. Sarraf.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the organizers of this event. And I'm honored to get to speak with you and share my experience on the job search. I'm going to start by talking through the kind of what happens before you apply to a job. So talking about how to find jobs to apply to, how to request letters of recommendation, that sort of thing. And you learned a little bit about this in the introduction, but just to share again my story. So I did my PhD in composition and applied linguistics at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and I finished in 2020. My dissertation focused on technical and professional communication, and I was working as an assistant director of our writing center at the time. So my coursework was split between composition and applied linguistics. And then in my dissertation, I kind of carved out more of a focus on professional communication. And as is maybe true of a lot of graduate students, I don't know, maybe many of you are far more exactly know what you want to do, what kind of job you want to have afterwards. My goal was to I was like, I have to get a job. So I tried to remain flexible, and I tried to do different things in graduate school and in my research so that when I went on the job market, I could then make a decision about what direction I want to go in. So I was like, okay, I want to have some experiences in applied linguistics, some that are more administrative and some that are in technical communication, because I just need to make sure that I can get a job. So that's kind of my vantage point and how I approach things. So the first time I went on the market, it was the global pandemic had just started, and I applied to 3 positions in 3 states, but the 3 states were right by each other: Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia. And so it wasn't a very big geographic region. My partner had a full-time job at the time, and so I was kind of limited because we wanted to keep that job. So I applied and I got one offer. That position was at West Virginia University. And so it was about an hour and a half from where I was living. So moved there. And I was in that position for about a year when I started to feel like I wanted to go on what I think of as like a national, or for some people, it might be an international job search. I wanted to do kind of like the big job search where you put out a lot of applications before I kind of made a decision about where I wanted to stay, because I had never tried for a tenure track job, and that was what I thought I was interested in. So the second time I went on the market, I applied to 11 positions in 9 different states. 10 of them were tenure track and one was non-tenure track. And I got 3 offers and I ended up in California. So then I started my full-time role in fall of 2022. And I teach technical communication, and we have a program here, a technical communication certificate that I direct. So my writing center administrative work kind of prepped me for that. So in my job, I do a lot of developing curriculum. So as opposed to like beforehand, I had developed the courses I was going to teach, or maybe I was teaching courses that other people had taught before, but now I'm in charge of making sure that students have like an entire pathway through the curriculum. And so it's been a much kind of bigger picture perspective on curriculum. And I advise students going through the program. I also do recruitment. So for example, I got involved with a user experience festival on campus as a way to connect with students who maybe are in other professions or other majors, and might be interested in the program. So I'm the only technical and professional communication person in my department. And by the way, I'm in an English department, and it's a very traditional literature department. So we have I'm the only tech comm person, and then we have a linguistics person who just retired, and we're hiring to replace them. And so, yeah, so I interact a lot with that program as well, because it's also very small. So I'm going to talk more about how to find job opportunities, how to stay organized on your search, and how to request letters of recommendation. But before you begin, this is my second preamble. I feel like I just gave a preamble. So this is preamble number 2. One thing that I think is important to think about is to think about like, what's your personal brand? Like, what role do you want to play in academia? And it's maybe okay to not know. Like, are you more so somebody who loves to teach? Are you sure that you want to have research as part of your job? Are you wanting to do both? You don't have to know for sure, because you might not have a sense until you're in a job and you're like, oh, I really miss teaching. I want to do more teaching. I don't like the pressure to publish, or vice versa. But when you present yourself on the market, you have to present yourself as aligning with the school you're applying to. So you could apply to Research One schools as mostly a scholar, as well as small liberal arts colleges as mostly a teacher. But when you do that, you have to change the way you're presenting yourself on the job market. And it also is important to define your primary and secondary fields of expertise. Like, are you primarily an applied linguist with interest also in like rhetoric and composition? Or are you more of somebody who's interested in writing studies more broadly? Within linguistics, are you more so on the applied linguistics side or computational linguistics? I know that this organization is applied linguistics, but many of us have various interests as well. So it's thinking through that, and then updating your online presence, because even if you apply to some jobs that are like completely linguistics jobs and others that are more interdisciplinary, people are going to search for you, and you need to show them that you have like a consistent brand. And so making sure that your website's updated and that your LinkedIn profile is also updated. And then if you want to transition, like let's say you really want a job doing something like directing a linguistics program, that would be your dream, is developing curriculum and advising students, but you've been teaching first year composition. So how do you get experience teaching linguistics courses or TESOL courses? finding ways as maybe an adjunct or volunteering or tutoring or something so that you can fill out your CV showing that you've done the things that you want to be doing in your future job. In terms of where to find jobs, you're probably familiar with some of this, but just to tell you what I use, higher ed jobs is my favorite because it's really easy to search and you can look at various categories. Like I always check the English category, linguistics, TESOL. So you can look at all of those different categories. You can break it down by geographic region, full-time, part-time. MLA job list, even though it's the Modern Language Association, they also have jobs in linguistics, technical communication, composition. So I would also look there. It's also a good idea to join email lists and groups. So the WAC Clearinghouse has a curated list, and if these slides are sent out to you, you'll be able to click on the link in this PD or in this slide. But they have a list where it lists just a bunch of different email listservs. So you can sign up for those listservs and then get announcements. And a lot of times, whenever employers are recruiting, they'll post things on higher ed jobs, MLA job list, but they'll also send out emails to people in their professional listservs. So that's a good way to also hear about searches. Networking is also important. It's good to, go to conferences, connect with professionals in the field. But one thing, and I would be interested in other people's knowledge of this, in my understanding, universities are so tied by their human resources departments about, like, if they have a plan of how they're going to recruit, they can't break that plan. So, we have a linguistics job open where I'm teaching. I have friends in linguistics. I want them to apply. Maybe I can kind of say, hey, you should apply to this, but there are rules about you can't really personally invite people to apply. So that's why as a graduate student, it's important that you reach out to your network because they might not reach out to you because they don't want to break the rules of their university and make the search biased. So let's talk about screening, organizing, and prioritizing job posts. So whenever you're looking at a job ad, the first thing I think to ask yourself is just, does the job interest you at all? And if yes, why? And it's my personal opinion is that it's good to keep an open mind about what types of jobs interest you, just because since the market is difficult to break into, having an open mind is beneficial. But you don't want to apply to a job that you have no interest in because it does take a lot of time to put job applications together. And so it's better, I think, to spend your time on jobs that you truly are interested in rather than ones that if you got the offer, there's no way you would go there. Also ask yourself, do I meet the minimum requirements? Because if you don't meet the minimum requirements, it's not very likely that you will get an initial interview. It's certainly possible because we never know what will happen with job searches. Maybe the candidate pool or the list of candidates that year, it's a really competitive year. There are a lot of job ads out, and so maybe it's a small pool of candidates. Maybe there are people on the search committee who actually kind of want something else, but it's different than what the ad says. So it's not to say that you can't apply, but it's probably the best use of your time if you at least meet the minimum requirements. For example, if they say PhD in applied linguistics is required, then you should probably have a PhD in applied linguistics. Also ask yourself, can I craft a convincing application? So do you have evidence that shows that you can do the things they're asking you to do? And then, of course, ask yourself, am I willing to live where the job is located? And if you have family members who would move with you, you might also ask them if they're willing to live where the job is located. So I know this looks very elementary school, but I just pulled this job ad off the internet for an example of kind of how I would be reading a job ad. So I think this search is still live. William and Mary. So I wrote, am I willing to live where the job is located? Does the job interest me? You can find that out by looking at the mission statement. Like, notice how they define linguistics as the study of language both as a faculty of mind and a social institution. Okay, that's kind of sociolinguistics-y, right? So you can kind of start to get a feel for what they're looking for just by how they're defining linguistics. Then in the second paragraph, they're looking for applicants with research expertise in the semantics of understudied language. Can I write an application that convinces readers that I have this expertise? If the answer is no, then it might not be the right job to apply to. Then you can read a little bit more and figure out, okay, they want somebody who will teach courses in semantics, syntax, computational methods, and contribute to the teaching of our introductory course. And you have to have a PhD or in linguistics or a related field by time of appointment. So do you meet those requirements? Now, again, if you haven't taught, because as graduate students, it's so hard to get assigned a really specialized course like semantics, right? But showing maybe that you taught a course and you did an assignment related to that might be a way to convince potential employers that you have that experience. Okay, so in terms of ranking your priorities, personally, I would rank high priority ones that you're really well qualified for, you are interested in, both the work and the location, because ideally you'll live there for at least a couple of years. If you hate it, you can go back on the job market, right? But those are your top priority schools. Your medium priority would be you're still well qualified, and maybe you're interested in the work or the location. Like maybe it's a really neat job, but it's not your dream location. I would still put that as medium priority. And same with vice versa. Maybe it's a place you really want to live. It's close to family, or alternatively, it's close to the beach or something like that. And you love the location and the work is good enough. So those are your medium. And then your low are like you're somewhat qualified and somewhat interested. You might still apply to those low priority jobs, but maybe work on them last so that you save your energy for high and medium priority. So in terms of how to get organized, wherever you keep your files, like I was using Google Drive for this, I have a folder for job applications and then the job search year. And then I have just different universities that I've applied to. So I organize it by university. In each of the folders, I actually put the job ad. You can take a screenshot or download a PDF of the web ad. That's really helpful because down the road, whenever you're, like, for example, if you're negotiating an offer, they might have removed the ad, and it's very helpful to have a copy to look back to. I also put all my application materials in there as well as interview materials there. And then this is just a screenshot of my job tracking spreadsheet. So this thing got really big, but basically I have institution, location, the priority, when it's due, the status, who I asked for recommendations, the submission link, the job ad link, the department, the title. I copy paste their preferred qualifications. I note other observations I have about the advertisement. I marked down whether or not the job involved teaching graduate students. I marked down the type of institution, like is it a public institution, private, community college, that sort of thing. Some ads will tell you the teaching load, others won't. This one didn't tell me the teaching load. And then I copy paste the application instructions and some specifics. I didn't take a screenshot of it for our purposes, but I will tell you that the screen continued, and I also had like personal notes, and then I also had a column for what my partner thought of the location and of the job. So it's just something to keep track, because when you're juggling that many job applications, it helps to have a document with everything.
I'm sorry, Dr. Sarraf. Our time is up, but if you can add just like a few comments about the letters of recommendation, that will be great.
Sure. So with requesting letters of recommendation, it's similar to whenever you requested them for graduate school. Just keep in mind that you should probably have somebody who is related to the field you're applying to. So if you are somebody who's applied linguistics all the way, it will probably be pretty easy. But let's say you have a lot of linguistics mentors and professors, but you're applying for a rhetoric job. Maybe try to find someone in that field who knows your work, who can write a letter for you. I have a little bit about like interdisciplinary positions, but maybe we can address that in the Q&A if there are more questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just also wanted to ask Dr. Zhang and Dr. Sa if they have anything additional to share.
I would like to leave the time to Dr. Sa because I was really in a rush when I started. So really, perhaps Dr. Sa, you can speak on this.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you, Dr. Sarraf. I mean, it was quite comprehensive, and I think Dr. Sarraf covered majority of things that I could think of. One thing that I would like to stress is, always reach out to people, reach out to the people who you can trust. When you're going to conferences, the AAAL is coming, so reach out to, people, write to them and ask for appointments and share where you are in the field, where you are in the job market. That's always helpful. Reach out to people beyond your supervisory committee. It's really important. Sometimes you get very limited kind of advice from your own advisor. So it's really important that you reach out to other people as well. For example, like I at least knew 2 positions were coming out before they were advertised. And I came to know through the connection. So it's really important that you build up your connection and get connected. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sarraf and Dr. Sa. And pretty sure we will have some time in Q&A session that we can address more details that we have to leave behind just for now. And now we are going to move on to Dr. Zhang's presentation, and we're going to talk about job strategies during job application.
Okay, are you all able to see my screen? Yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you, Dr. Sarraf, for speaking on the first part. It was very comprehensive and helpful. So it's such a privilege to be here, sharing some of my experience and perhaps random thoughts with folks in our field. So I'll be focusing on the timeline and some of the process during our job application. So first, just a little bit of background regarding my own trajectories towards the faculty position I have now. So before I started my PhD study, I acquired my master's from City University of Hong Kong, and I taught a little bit mostly in Shanghai, also a little bit in Hong Kong. And then I started my PhD study at the University of Georgia in 2018. So I graduated last year. So I was on the job market when I was dissertating. I was in the program of TESOL and World Language Education. However, the program was housed in our Department of Language and Literacy Education. So I also do literacy work, for example, embodied literacy, and even some qualitative methodology work. But when I was on the job market, I was still just focusing on in the field of TESOL and applied linguistics. So the faculty position I have now is what's been called a doctoral lecturer position in the TESOL program at Hunter College. So it's a fairly new name. I've never heard this name before I had this position. So it's more of a more or less like a non-tenure track clinical assistant professor position, or as some institutions we might call it assistant teaching professor. So this is my position now, and just a little bit background. So my timeline, for those of you who might be running late or in a rush, don't worry too much. I was really in a rush. I started preparing in October. I literally, when I looked at some of the job postings, the deadline was literally last week. So I've already missed some deadlines. It was because I was waiting on a couple of publications during the summer, also just started engaging and writing with my dissertation data. So I was really in a rush. I had the opportunity, I had the option of staying at University of Georgia for another 1 or 2 years. So my advisor was really supportive. So I just wanted to give it a try. And then I started actually searching, looking at job postings and sending out applications in October. And that's also the time I started drafting my application materials. I sent out 19 applications in total, and I eventually was invited for 5 Zoom interviews or initial first round interviews. And then out of the 5 invitations, 5 Zoom interviews, I was invited to 4 different places for campus visit, which was kind of rare, I would say, because normally what I heard from my colleagues and friends, we'll have 25% Zoom interview chance out of all the applications we sent out. And out of all the Zoom interviews we have, we'll have 25% chance for a campus visit. So I didn't know what happened, but I had 4 campus visits. And then this is just my timeline, but I would say the general timeline or process for job application, I would say a lot of my colleagues and friends, people I know, they started preparing in the summer. Of course, we might start picturing things, thinking about things before the summer, but that's the time a lot of my friends and colleagues started to really sit down and drafting application materials, reaching out to their dissertation committee members or even other professors for reference letters. And then you will see a lot of job postings starting August. Really, a lot of job postings are out in August, but it doesn't mean that we have to start sending out our applications in August or at that when you first see it. I think a lot of search committee members will not even see the pool or the application materials until after the deadline. And it's actually a policy at a lot of institutions. So I feel that the key is to submit a good application package before the deadline. And because I was in a rush, I actually submitted a lot of them right before some major deadlines. And if you look at the 2 different time periods, my experience was that before December, most of the job postings before December were different from those you see in the spring. So in terms of the types of the contract and nature of the job and institutions, those you see in the spring are a lot of them are non-tenure track. Not necessarily, a lot of them are not at R1 universities, and a lot of them might be just teaching focused. So most of the R1 institutions and tenure track positions were posted before December. At least that was my experience. And then most of the Zoom interviews or initial interviews will be done in between November and February. November was quite early, as what I heard and what I've experienced. And then there will be a campus visit. Normally, I would say 10 or maybe 15 final candidates will be invited to have Zoom interview. And once you are invited to have the Zoom interview, people tend to move fairly quickly. Normally, after a few days or a week or so, you might be invited to have a campus visit. And then they might schedule it maybe a few weeks after the invitation. And after the campus visit, you might receive a phone call from the dean in terms of the finalizing an offer. So this is the general overall process and timeline. For the initial interviews, all my initial interviews were done via Zoom, but I do know that there might be phone interviews. For the Zoom interview, normally there will be 4 to 5 search committee members on the Zoom. We might start with some small talk. How are you doing? If you're at the conference or if you're about to defend your dissertation, it'll be around, just a couple of 20 seconds or 1 minute. And one interesting thing is that I would say that we might not necessarily see everyone on the Zoom on the screen so that we can see their facial expression. I've had experience when I was looking at a conference room with people's faces on the Zoom, but also people who are kind of far away can't really see if they're smiling or not. So that kind of combination. So be prepared for that in terms of the format or process. And in terms of preparing for the Zoom interview or initial interview, one of the most important things to keep in mind might be the post. So who posted it, and who or what are they looking for? Because a job post normally goes through multiple rounds of revision or meetings among faculty members. So it's really important to look at what they're looking for, some of the phrases or words, statements they put out there on their job post. And then in terms of interview questions, in general, those questions always touch upon three aspects: teaching, research, and service. But I would say it's always important, always helpful to ask around and make a list of different types of questions, because the field and our job market might be different. If we're just looking at specific questions from a book or from 5-10 years ago, it might be different nowadays. So I've asked folks who have been on the job market over the past couple of years, they've changed their jobs, and also folks who are already tenured, but they've moved to different institutions, and also some of my friends who just got a job the year before I was on the job market. And also always be prepared for tough or tricky questions. I was asked questions such as, what is the biggest challenge we face now in education? And the first time I was asked that question, I was a bit surprised. I was feeling, okay, I don't know what's the biggest challenge. And it's interesting that I was asked the same question at a different institution. And also questions such as, which course would you like to teach among all the courses we currently offer in our program? And what textbook will you use? I did my homework, went through all their website, but I actually didn't see all the courses they were offering at that time point. So I was a bit surprised. I didn't really know or what are some of the options. I was also a bit worried in terms of the textbook choice. I don't know if they want to know, if they want to see specific textbooks I will be using. So these are some of the tough questions that it can be hard when it comes to the in the moment decision-making processes. And then things we can do when we are preparing, when we have a list of questions, we have, tough questions or regular questions. One thing I did was to group questions based on different themes, like almost like a thematic analysis, teachings, research, service, or the priorities that you think some of the questions that might be asked by this specific institution or some of the specific search committee members. And then some of the questions that might be tricky or questions perhaps people won't ask. And for me, I did write down every single word for some of the major questions that people tend to always ask. For example, why you're interested in this position or this institution, what you can bring in terms of teaching or research. But for most of the other questions, I only wrote down some bullet points. But I would say this really depends on personal preference. I do know some of my colleagues, they wrote down every single word, and because the stakes are really high. So it's very important to pay attention to things we say or which we chose not to say. And when it comes to rehearsal and practice, we can definitely go through things by ourselves. It might also be helpful to pair up with a colleague or friend to interview each other, or even with a professor. It depends on the dynamic in between you and your advisor or the professor you're working with. And you can even practice in front of mirror, but it's always important to go through it again and again. Audio recording can also be helpful, I would say. Okay, so after Zoom interview or the initial interview, we might be invited to have campus visit. And most of the campus visits, I would say, will be around 1 day, one whole day, from having breakfast with the search committee members or meeting up with them after the breakfast, all the way to dinner with some of the faculty members. But I did have one campus visit for which I spent almost 2 days on campus. So there were more things going on. And normally, either someone will pick you up from the airport if you're flying, or you can Uber, or they will arrange for you a car, either Uber or a Lyft. My experience was always to first drop off my luggages and get some rest, and then we might have dinner, or just the day after we have breakfast. So I would say be careful if you go right into a dinner meeting. So someone just come pick you up from the airport and then you go straight into the dinner. So make sure you chug some coffee and be prepared if you want to, look at how you dress up. Then you'll have a campus tour. You meet different people, the dean, the chair. You have teaching demo, or both teaching demonstration and research talk. And who might be involved? There will be, I would say there will always be one of the search committee members walking you from A to B, touring the campus, or it can be different search committee members doing this. At times, if they send someone to pick you up from the airport, it can be their search committee chair or someone, one of their faculty members. And oftentimes the interview starts from there. They might have a small talk with you, and it's a very intimate conversation. One of my experiences was to have we were driving from the airport to the campus. It was almost 2-hour drive. So I was sitting with the search committee chair in the car for 2 hours. So we were chatting about different things. And then, in addition to the search committee members, you will also almost definitely meet their department chair, and also the dean of the school or college. And you might also run into other faculty members or professors, or people running specific programs. Of course, you'll definitely meet people working in their office. So make sure shake hands, introduce your name to each other, ask for their names, and smile. And also you might be running into some students as well. I'm just looking at the time. Hopefully I still have one or two more 2 minutes. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that when you are invited to a campus visit, on paper, you and all the other final candidates, are already good enough on paper. So it's really, really important to put on a show and to have some kind of swag. It's very different from being a grad student, and it was really a learning curve for me. And for the teaching demonstration research talk, I don't know if we have enough time. I'll just briefly touch upon it. If most of the time for the teaching position, you are always required to do a teaching demonstration. And for R1 institutions, research position, only research talk, at times you might be required to do both. And for the research talk, it's more or less as like a individual paper presentation and at AAAO. You might have more time. You might want to put a little bit more data, tangible things there, almost like a show, a promotion of your work. And the teaching demonstration can be happening either with fake students, faculty members, but most of the time you'll be in a real classroom, in a real class with their students. Just briefly touch upon this. So I think we might have some time for other things.
Thank you very much. Either Dr. Sarraf or Dr. Shah, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, okay, I can go ahead. Okay, so the first suggestion, another suggestion I can give is, do good research on the institution that you have applied to. That's really important. Sometimes, you get a very basic question: what courses would you be able to teach? And if you haven't looked up their list of courses, that gives an impression that you are not very interested into that position. So that's really important to do some research, including the mission statement. Because I remember in one of the interviews, I was asked a question from their mission statement. What do you think about our mission statement? So that's important. And as I said, there can be very basic questions. Very similar to Dr. Zhang's experience. I was asked a question like, how do you define second language acquisition? So it's a very basic question, but in the meantime, that they are testing you from what perspective you are coming from. So you need to be prepared to show your scholarly alignment and belief, right? Another suggestion about the teaching demo. So when you are teaching, presenting your teaching demonstration, it would be helpful if you can make some connection to your own research. So you are teaching on a certain topic, but show how your teaching is informed by your own research. And if you make connection to the research, that gives you kind of more grading from the committee's viewpoint. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add and reiterate a couple of things. One is I really encourage you to keep a list of questions that you're asked in interviews. It can be very hard to do this. Sometimes they'll send you a list of the questions. If they don't, just do your best to just take a moment and jot down the questions that they asked you like immediately after, because it will help you to prepare for next time around. And it will help you to help your friends also, because you can share with them resources of questions asked. Also, whenever committees ask challenging questions, my opinion is that part of what they want to see is that you can think on your feet and that you can essentially survive without too much help or mentorship. I was asked a question for the job that I am now in during the interview. I was talking about community engaged pedagogy, and I was asked what readings would I assign. And honestly, in the moment, I didn't have readings off the top of my head. And so I just kind of made up a quick answer. But I think that oftentimes the committee is just trying to see that you can think on your feet and that you can adapt. One other tip is just that both in your application letter, and when you're interviewing, too often we sell ourselves, but we don't connect it to the job. So just to reiterate again, at the end of every single paragraph in a job letter, I said, and here's how this can help X university in this specific way. And so make sure that you're tailoring your response to the specific job, because that will increase your chances of getting an interview.
Thank you so much for such a detailed feedback in 2 hours of drive with a search committee. That sounds really intense, but wish I can be on that position one day. So thank you for sharing that. And we are now going to move on to what's next, like when you were offered with your job. So I'm gonna open the floor to Dr. Sa.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me here, and it's my honor to be invited to this wonderful panel. And of course, thank you, Dr. Sarraf and Dr. Zhang, for sharing your insights about the first 2 stages for preparing for the job market. So my part deals with finalizing the job application. Okay, so, sorry. Okay, so I'll briefly talk about my journey. So, in the beginning, I was introduced that I had my PhD from University of British Columbia in 2022. So in that year, when I graduated, I didn't necessarily apply for many positions. I think a couple of positions, and I just got a postdoc position, which I was interested in. And when I was in the postdoc position, I was seriously in the job market, looking for tenure track position, but my search was kind of limited to research universities, because I always thought, my strength is research than teaching. So In that year, I applied for 28 tenure track positions in the US, Canada, and internationally. I was longlisted for 9 initial interviews, and finally I was shortlisted for 3 positions. So Dr. Zhang was right. It's about 25 to 30% of success rate after your initial interview. And however, I got all the 3 positions that I was shortlisted for, including 1 in the United States and 2 internationally. And because of my personal preference, I chose to come to Hong Kong, where I am at the Education University of Hong Kong. So in this brief talk, I will be talking about what to expect once you are offered the position. What are the things that you need to be paying particular attention at? What would be some of the strategies for productive and successful job negotiation, and how to manage when you get multiple offers? How significant it is to communicate, sustained communicate with your advisor. Well, so let's assume you all have a job now. So you have the job offers, but getting a job offer is not an end deal. It's a kind of starting another phase of anxiety and stress because you need to make decisions. So first of all, like when you have a job offers, celebrate your achievement. All achievement has to be celebrated. And now you need to think whether it is like winning a lottery for you, and you were just satisfied. You got a job offer, and you think I'm going to just get it. I'm just going to accept it, or are you open to negotiating the offer? Are you going to negotiate for what you deserve for being in the field? So negotiating a job offer is largely an individual and local process. So always think, my experience might be very different from your experience. So what I share with you may be different in your real life, situation. And it is very local. So you need to, it very depends on the type of university and even the context, even the country. If it is about the United States, the process would be different than what the culture is in Hong Kong, for example. So one thing we need to consider is to think negotiation is very normal and it is expected. Some people, mainly minoritized scholars, that think negotiation is not normal. You make a negative impression to the committee. But just I would like to say that the negotiation is very normal, and all universities, all search committees expect you to negotiate. So after you receive a call or email offering you a position, don't rush to accept it unless you think it's just a lottery and you just accept it. You just pause and think about the position, and you may even send a follow-up question like, I would like to know more about the offer. Once you know more about the offer, this gives you a better idea of what you would like to negotiate about. And again, I would like to reiterate that negotiation does not harm the relationship with the department, which is a belief, for many of us. I would think it rather builds a collegial relationship that gives you opportunity to interact and share what you believe and what you need. It's not greedy to ask for the support you really need to become successful in your new place, in your new career. So it's always expected. However, it can be challenging for scholars, primarily from marginalized subject positions. Many of us who come from different parts of the world to the United States, for example, have imposter syndrome. And because of that, sometimes you happen to have too modest asks, or sometimes we don't ask, we just accept it. So you need to be thinking that you have to, it entirely depends on you what the offer is, but my suggestion is just go for negotiation. But again, negotiation depends on whether you have one offer or multiple offers. If you have one offer, then you have to be very, very careful, what you are asking for. When you have multiple offers, you have backups. So when you, get multiple offers, you need to think, is this, if this offer is your first choice? If this offer is not your first choice, and you are still waiting to hear from other institutions, or you have already heard from other institutions, then the first thing you are going to negotiate is for time. I know there are many rushed hiring timeline, like you hear from the department that, okay, so we would like to hire you, and then they give you 2 days. So can you respond in the next 2 days? So they often tend to do that, but you need to be careful that 2 days is not enough. So you need to negotiate for the time, and you can reach out to them, say, okay, so can I get a week or a couple of weeks to make my mind. There are several things that can be negotiated once you have the offer. For example, like the salary, startup fund, teaching load, teaching release, guaranteed junior sabbatical, conference travel, start date, relocation expenses, family housing benefits, spousal hiring, tenure expectations, and there could be many other additional considerations depending on your individual situations. So primarily when you get the offer states your salary. Sometimes if it is a research university, they state startup fund. Of course, all job offers will have a start date. Sometimes they would have a relocation expenses. So you get all these, and in case you don't have the teaching loads, teaching release details, or any other details, you're gonna, ask them in your follow-up email, and they will tell you. And you can, of course, negotiate the salary. Again, negotiating salary is, you need to think how much. People normally say don't go beyond 10%. If you were asking up to 10%, that's kind of expected. 10 to 20% sometimes would be too much ask. So you need to be careful about how much you are asking. You can certainly ask for a better startup grant, and the teaching load. And the teaching release is normally in your first semester, and sometimes even you can ask in your first year of your tenure track position. And again, you can't negotiate every aspect of the offer. So you need to be careful what are important for you. For example, if you are negotiating for a spousal hiring, then you need to compromise your other aspects. There are certain things to consider when planning your negotiation. For example, types and status of the institution and even the department. So if you have applied to a teaching institution, and if you are asking for a course release, extensive course release, they may not be, they may not agree with your demand. So you need to be thinking about the institution and even the department, whether it could be a big university, R1 university, but the department could be very small and they could have very limited budget. If there is a way to find out how badly they want you, sometimes that you'll know it, you will feel it through the process. Sometimes you can find it out through your personal connections. So if you know how badly they want you, this gives you more power for negotiation. And of course, do you have other offers to back up? You need to also think what is doable, what is reasonable. All institutions have their financial and logistic limitations. So, you need to be careful about what you are asking for and whether it could be possible for them to offer you. It's not rare. I mean, it's rare, but it's not uncommon to get your offer rescinded. And that sometimes happens when your ask is too much. When you, for example, you ask like 20% salary, and in the meantime, you are negotiating for your spousal hiring, and you have too many demands. And there could be the second person the department is equally interested in, a little bit less, but maybe the department is interested in another candidate as well. So it might happen that the offer will get rescinded. It's very rare, but this happens. So you need to be careful what you're asking for. There are some strategies that you can adopt, like when you normally it depends. Like when you are offered a position, sometimes you get a quick call from the search chair or even dean. For example, in my case, I just got a call from dean from nowhere. I was in a grocery store and I just got a call from dean that I got the position. So it really depends. And when you get a call and you are not very prepared to deal with, then you can just say, okay, well, I'm interested, but I will get back to you. Don't just commit over the phone. And if you get this email, if you would like to give a quick call to the search chair or the department head to understand some general institutional norms and culture before you propose your offers, that would be helpful. This gives you kind of more idea about the impression you have made and the possibility for negotiation. Not all positions are open for huge margin, so there could be like the little room for negotiation. So you should be able to find out. And based on your understanding, sometimes when you are out for campus visit, you can understand the kind of how much interested they are. I mean, there's so equal kind of interest in all candidates, but you'll find a way to know your position there. And then accordingly, you can craft a list of requests with well-informed input. So you need to have a better understanding of that position and the department and the institution before you propose. And as I said, negotiation on the phone can sometimes be dangerous for some people because it could be the fact that you are not very good at communication instantly over the phone, and you may commit for the position without negotiating anything, or you may be just put pressure by the well-skilled speakers like the dean. After you have your better understanding, then send them a reasonable negotiation letter via email. Again, think about priorities. What you negotiate depends on your situation and goals. Again, I remind you, don't negotiate for everything. You need to make a list of priority, what you would like to negotiate. Finally, communication. So there's two layers of communications. One layer of communication is with the search committee, or once you are offered the position, you may be directly communicating with the HR. In international context, normally your communication would be with HR. In the United States, either is department head, search chair, or even or the dean of the school. And be a bit careful about the tone in the communication and try to avoid any misunderstanding. Don't sound arrogant. Sometimes we happen to sound, although we're not intentionally doing that. So for example, like don't give a lecture on what they need to do. Like, okay, so you get an offer with a particular salary and now you're saying, okay, I think this salary is very close to poverty level. Other universities give better salary than this. This kind of language language can upset them. So we need to be a bit careful about the tone, and we don't have to be too greedy. For example, you can write, I would like to ask for a salary of this amount, reflecting my experience and background. So when you are proposing something, you need to make a case of why you are asking for more money or more startup grant. So you can stress like, you have a particular number of papers, you have a particular number of grants, you have, teaching experiences. For example, in my current position, I negotiated for a higher salary based on my post-PhD experience. And I said, okay, I have like, at least 2 big grants. So, I can write grant applications easily. I have a multiple number of, papers. So you should make a case like why you are asking for, more. Finally, so you need to seek advice. So this stage is, you are at a stage that you shouldn't do everything alone. You should be seeking advice from your advisors. When I say advisors, it's not necessarily your doctoral advisor. And my advice would be, do not limit to one person. Reach out to several people who you trust and seek advice from them. But finally, like, no one knows your situation better than you. So you listen to everybody, you get advice from everyone, and then make your own decision, because you have your family situation that nobody knows. So once the decision is made, inform the institution immediately with warmth and enthusiasm so that you are ready. And if you have other offers, turn them down with respect. So again, and sign the contract and then celebrate. There are some resources that I would recommend. So The Professor is In is a kind of top read for all of us who are in the job market. So I would strongly recommend this book, The Professor is In. And even there is a website you can go to, and there are lots of blogs on different processes, on the different stages of the job search process. And there are lots of, you'll see lots of people commenting with their real experiences. So you can even go have a look at the website. Another interesting resource is the Academic Job Search Handbook. It's a bit outdated in a sense. I think the last was 2009, but it's still, I think it's very helpful. If you would like to know more about how to negotiate, mainly for women and people from marginalized community, there's another book called Ask For. This gives you idea that how can you negotiate in the job market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sa. And I want to ask if Dr. Sarraf or Dr. Zhang have anything to add.
I can add a small thing. Sorry if you've already touched upon this, Dr. Sa, regarding the visa sponsorship. Yes, so I would say when it comes to having an offer in negotiation in the context of US or maybe other countries as well, my experience, I did need the visa sponsorship. So it's important at that point to be very explicit, because there are specific policies that throughout the interview process, no one can ask if you need it, if you are a permanent residency or anything. So it's very important at that point to bring it up, and oftentimes it needs to be written down as part of your offer. Because when I was going through the paperwork, the legal team, the law firm, was actually looking at the offer, see what are some of the specific things written down in the offer. Another thing, I think Dr. Sa touched upon this. It's so helpful to ask our advisor or someone close to us for their insights when we are doing this type of negotiation, either on the phone or via emails, because I feel that it's really a specific type of genre or literacy practice that a lot of us might not have access to. I didn't grow up with having access to this type of literacy practice or genre. So it was very crucial to ask for advice. Yeah.
That's great. And one more thing I would add is that in my experience, the chair of the search committee is going to they're going to make a recommendation of who to make an offer to. And then it depends on the institution. Sometimes the whole department votes on it. And then the dean often is who approves that search, that offer. So what this means is that the search committee chair or the chair of the department actually often wants you to get the best deal possible, because they're your mediator between you and the dean's office. And so don't be afraid to work with the department chair or whoever's assisting you with that negotiation to get the best deal that you can, from the perspective that a department's worst fear is that the search will fail. So if the search fails, if they can't hire anybody, then a lot of times the position just goes away. So if someone retires and there's a vacancy and they can't fill the position, then the dean's office might not approve it again and they lose a tenure track line. So keep in mind that the department might be kind of stressed out also and wanting to really ensure that they get a candidate to accept an offer. And that should give you some confidence while you negotiate.
Thank you so much. Especially Dr. Zhang, because I'm international, coming from Asian background, and you were sort of like highlight in how to find a job from a marginalized perspective. That was really, like, personally really resonated with me. And all other, Dr. John, your visa, and Dr. Sarraf, like the mindset that we have to like get into that job negotiation, everything has been really helpful. So now we have a few questions from our audience.